It's the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Here's your host, Matthew Ablin.
Hello and welcome to episode 41 of the Queen City Music Podcast. Now that we have our foot in the door for 2021, I'm excited for the year ahead. This month, I'm speaking with Johnny G from the blog Reporting from 20XX. This is a news and review site for games, music, and entertainment in Charlotte and beyond. Johnny G, thank you for coming on the podcast today, man. It's going to be great talking to you about all the things that you got going on for Reporting from 20XX.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, man. So, Johnny, I start the podcast off the same way. Are you originally from the Charlotte area?
I am. I grew up in South Charlotte, right off of South Tryon.
We were talking before the podcast, and you say you always came back. So fill us in a little bit about your background.
Okay. I grew up here, but it really seems like a boomerang. So out of high school, I went to the Navy, did 5 years on a submarine, and I came back. Went to community college over at CPCC, went abroad for a little bit, came back, and then I went to UNCC, also went abroad again, came back, and I've just been here ever since. And COVID kind of stopped a lot of us from traveling, so even if I wanted to go somewhere right now, I couldn't.
So, Johnny, you've run the blog Reporting from 20XX. Can you fill everybody in about what the blog is about? Because, of course, it's a music podcast, so you've got something going on that's musical with 20XX. So fill us in.
So Reporting from 20XX, the name is itself a game reference, Mega Man titles. And 20XX is the year. But Reporting from... it gives me, I guess, license to write about whatever I want because I'm reporting from the year. You fill in the two X's and, we're in 2021 now. It was 2020. I started writing at the tail end of 2016. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly for, I guess, 2020, it was mostly a music blog. Just because there wasn't a lot to go out to or not a lot of reports about anything going on with any of the game organizations. Not to say there wasn't, but when it comes to music, I use Reporting from 20XX to talk about artists, to go to concerts. If you look at my YouTube page, I have, I would say phone video, because I started from the bottom. I've just been working my way through a lot of the skill sets of different bands that have come through, either touring or, they're from the area.
Right.
I now write spotlights, and I did before, of different artists that exist here. I review music from people that release music here. Courtney Lynn and Quinn, one band, Pull Over another. Let me see here. Those are the only two I can think of off the top of my head at the moment, but there's more on there. I also do 2 weekly streams on Twitch where I'll actually put up a music video of someone that actually released something in the scene. Ian Pasquini is someone who in 2020 has done a lot doing his singles. He also dove really headfirst into video work, and I actually learned a lot about him through all of that, which is amazing. He just put out a collection from everything he did in 2020 in an album, so definitely go check that out on Bandcamp. Anyone who was listening here, of course. I do a good bit. I do photography. I do videography. I'm a one-man show for the most part. I've every now and then have someone that's going to collaborate with me. I've had a couple friends that have come with me on video and photo shoots. But for the most part, it's me. It's my dream and it's my vision.
So what made you start the blog?
I would say it started with, I used to hate to write. And I learned to love writing a lot more when I could express things that I actually cared about. And that started really at Niner Times over at UNCC. I was in the entertainment section. I would write game reviews, but they also put me on a couple beats in the music scene. So we were talking earlier about one of my first, I guess, assignments was going to the neighborhood theater to cover the Dreamers and whatever band was headlining that day.
Okay. Since
then, Dreamers have, they've blown up. They're headlining their own tours. They're everywhere. They were on tour with One Republic, I think last year or in 2019. I missed that. I really wanted to go to that. That's kind of how it started.
Did you have a vision in mind for the blog when you started it? Because it's not, of course, it's not just music; it's gaming also. So, what made you think about combining these two topics together for a blog?
Because there's things going on in the music scene that people don't know about, and maybe they don't really think about. And there's also a game scene here that people don't know about. People or other organizations and individuals are trying to grow, trying to ascend from, the ground up. And I think people should know about it. Especially as you and me were talking earlier, I think more people should pay attention to what's going on in the music scene because there is a growing music scene. Spinny the Sequel is a hip-hop artist that originated over in New York, but has since called Charlotte his home. And I covered his release a couple weeks back. He did an EP, which is amazing. But I cited that, and the reply on Twitter from me to him is just like, "Y'all need to pay attention to what's going on in Charlotte." It's like, yeah, you do. And it's. I'm not the only one that feels this way. It's important, I think, for me and everybody else that it's like we're not alone. I went to another example is I went to the Business People's last concert in 2019, and I met the lead singer for Wine Pride, another local band there, and I made myself known. Usually, I used to go out to different concerts, and I don't post my face on my social media for the most part because I don't want people to look at me like I'm the star of the show. Like the star of the show are the bands and the musicians in our scene. So you don't distract from it. So in that, because of that, no one knows what I look like, or no one knew what I looked like, and I was just like this shadow figure. So when I went up to Aaron Foger, I really hope I didn't mispronounce that, and I hope he listens to this later and be like, Johnny. I told him I was reporting from 20XX, and he's just like, dude, I didn't think anyone actually listened to our music. Thank you. And I didn't really know what to do with that.
Right.
But it made me realize that there is a large populace of our artists that don't think what they do is important. And that also made me say, okay, this is also what I'm doing it for. I originally was just like, I'm going to talk about music and I'm going to talk about gaming here in Charlotte. And that was very simple mission statement.
Right.
But since then it's become, I'm going to expose artists. I'm going to get people to acknowledge that we actually have things going in Charlotte, that Charlotte is a growing music scene. I know we're between Richmond and Atlanta, which are two booming scenes, and Charlotte's got a lot to offer. We could take Raleigh. We could totally take Raleigh.
Well, just being curious, because of course my podcast, the Queen City Music Podcast, is geared towards the Charlotte scene. Was there something that you thought about being here that you wanted to make it specific to Charlotte? I mean, gaming, you could have done a blog that went, national, worldwide, and, brought in a lot of different things, but you are being specific to Charlotte, just like I am with the music, and you are as well with the music. What made you be more of a niche blog? What brought that about?
Honestly, it's my hometown.
Okay.
Even if I move away from here, I still want to talk about Charlotte. I do want to expand a little bit, and I've used my Sunday streams to, look outside the scene, because even though I do want it to be mostly Charlotte-centric, we do have traveling, touring musicians that come through here. So
right.
I will no shit roll a dice. I will figure out a state I want to look in, and then I look in the state. I use Bandcamp for this. I've been using Bandcamp all of 2020, and I totally undervalued tool to find new music. I mean, thousands of artists post new stuff on there every day, even if they don't think they're serious. And it's like, wow, okay, this is actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'll pinpoint a state. I'll try to find a city that's releasing something. And if they have a music video ready to go, I use it. I find an EP. I talk about it. And in the weekly newsletter, I say, hey, this is my Somewhere Sunday artist.
Nice.
And that also, I think, brings recognition to Charlotte, because they see that, okay, someone here is doing this. Maybe this is a cool music town. Maybe I should tour there. So it serves a dual purpose.
Gotcha. Bring a light on what we're doing here. I like that. So are you genre specific with 20XX or are you open to all different genres of music?
I am not specific whatsoever. I want the gas from everybody. I want everybody to hit me up with anything that you're doing. Like, if you are hip hop, hit me up. If you are rock, hit me up. If you are island rock, hit me up faster. But anything and everything I want to include. I think if I decide that I'm going to just do this genre, I'm going to miss a whole other world. And
right.
Charlotte, unfortunately, I don't think a lot of musicians do talk to one another. Like, I'll break it down to, you have musicians that are friends with one another, and they will talk amongst themselves. And sometimes there isn't a lot of outreach to others. I will say that Perry Fowler, Sinners and Saints, one of the duo, he owns Petras, and he regularly books different bands of different genres into the same, setup. And I love that. I think Wiley Buck over at the Milestone does a great job of that same thing. Hattie's does the same thing. Jamie Starks over at Tommy's does the same thing. Like, I think most of our venues, for the most part, do a very good job of mixing it up.
Right.
It's only like when you have like the big name artists, they'll go over to the Visual Light, they'll go to the Belk Theater, they might go to the Evening Muse. I think Evening Muse definitely tries to make it more genre specific in an actual booking for a night.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I feel like we do a good job of trying to mix, and I want those artists to talk more, and instead of just seeing the face and maybe like hearing the music once, like really try to explore what the other has, and maybe you can take that same type of imagery, that same type of imagination that made them bring their creativity out and put it into your own. Collaborate back and forth.
How do you see your role in the Charlotte music scene? There's a lot going on here. Everything's starting to bubble up a little bit. How do you see 20XX's role here in the Charlotte scene?
So you go to an art gallery. You find a guide. A guide takes you around to all the paintings, talks about each, stops you, and you see all these mediums on display in, this particular section. Doesn't speak highly about each, speaks favorably about all. You get that same type of energy with each thing that is brought up, whether it's time period, medium, who this artist was.
Right.
I see 20XX as being that same curator. I'll give you as much energy about this genre and this artist as I will about anybody else. I don't pick favorites. I don't want that duty. I mean, you have other blogs and other newspapers that do that. I won't say Queen City Nerve does with Justin and Ryan Pitkin. They have a thing of the best of the nest at the end of the year. They're not picking them. I mean, I don't even think I need to take a look because I actually have the latest issue, but I don't even think they themselves say, "Hey, I like this artist over all these others," or "This one spoke to me more." They just put up to vote for all the people in the city, and that's fair. That's democratic system, whatever. We're all curators. We all try to bring just as much notice to this artist as we do that. We don't have to. We don't have to pick favorites. Right. I mean, we probably do have favorites, but
yeah, I think everybody's got their favorites. But I mean, if you are somebody like myself or you, we are just trying to present the information and let other people see what we see about the Charlotte music scene and what's happening, in these different places. So I think that's something that everybody who's doing some kind of reporting, as it were, on the Charlotte scene gives. You might have a different slant than I have because you might go out more on a Friday night than I do and see different groups of bands, or I might see different groups of bands. So it's interesting that, you have all these different pockets of quote unquote reporters, of the Charlotte scene, giving a different slant and a different viewpoint of who's here. So just curious, are you the only one working out of 20XX, or is there other people that you work with?
There are more people that I work with that didn't work in 20XX. I have a couple friends that have helped me here and there, but for the most part, it's a one-man show. I've released a couple articles with Queen City Nerf, just going outside, and it's like, hey, I would like to write for this paper, so I did.
Right.
I promote a little bit with Ryan Williams, aka Time to Fly, Eric with Records on the Wall. Every now and then I'll go and do photography for them.
Yeah.
And they'll blast me and I'll blast them. I've worked most recently with Maker's Market over at Tommy's. It's an outdoor venue, so everyone has a mask on, everybody's safe, so on and so forth. But they have musicians. I did photography for them. That's more on my end, but I worked with the head of that particular organization to kind of get photos of all of the vendors that are out. Just give it a little bit more press, give it a little bit more to the package. I work with a little bit with everybody. I'm more of an add-on outside of 20XX than people really work with me. I guess. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a one-man operation, and you'll do things with other folks when it comes up. I mean, for me, like Eric, you said from Records on the Wall, Eric is one of my local partners. So we talked about it a while ago when he was on the podcast and said this would be great. So, Eric shoots up our Queen City Music Podcast on Facebook. I mention Records on the Wall on each podcast. So, I think it helps create a closer community when you work with others. It's not just one individual waving the flag, for themselves and for the Charlotte scene. I think it helps when everybody who's involved, I don't even just mean the musicians. I mean, those of us promoting the scene are helping one another, because I think it brings more strength to the scene itself. So Johnny, you were talking about earlier that you do something on Twitch. Do you have any goals to expand the blog, expanding reporting from 20XX?
A little bit here and there. Slowly. So right now I'm working on consistency. I do a weekly newsletter, the weekly wrap up, which more or less takes all of the artists that released something in the previous week. So I work a little bit backwards with that.
Okay.
But like all these things got released from Monday to the Sunday that I write up the newsletter.
Right.
I've also started talking to a couple of the game orgs now that they want to do a little bit more promotion on the side. There's been conversations in and of some of the community there. So I post a little bit of their promotions for the week ahead. So I'm working forward.
Okay.
And then right now I'm working on just keeping up with profile spotlights for artists in our area. I do the Twitch streams because it lets people actually see that I have a face.
Right.
I thought about that a while back. I'm like, okay, you know what? It's a little bit of entertainment. I give a platform to any of the artists out here that make music videos. So it's like, if you have a new video up, I'm probably scouting it, and I'm probably using it for Thursdays. And for Somewhere Sundays, I will reach out and try to see people outside of our scene into other scenes. So when I think of reporting from 20XX expanding, I see us not purely covering other scenes, but connecting to others and letting them know that we also exist, but they also exist.
Do you, just out of curiosity, you mentioned, getting music and doing reviews and things like that. Do you have local artists contacting you, sending you stuff so that you can do reviews for them? Or is that something that you are seeking out? Like me, we talked a little bit about it earlier. I'm always contacting people to come on the podcast. I'd love to get more people to contact me and say, hey, Matt, check it out. I'm here in Charlotte. Here's my music. But it doesn't happen as much as I would like. Do you have it happen more than I do?
I would say we both have about that same thing occur. I contact people more than they contact me, which I have no problems with. But as I've stayed consistent, people have discovered more of what I do, and I have a couple people that I need to actually get back with over on Instagram, on a couple of Facebook messages that I had lined up for January. I have been getting contacted a lot more. And I think that's going to build upon itself. It's just up for me to stay consistent with them, keep the channels open, as it were.
Right. So here's an outside question. What's your overall view of the Charlotte music scene in general? What do you think about it? What do you think about what's been happening here?
Outside of 2020, I think we are a growing scene. before everything went and stopped, I think as the city becomes a little bit more gentrified, which I mean, I can't say otherwise. We have a lot of people coming in. We have a lot of people trying to grow with the city, become a part of it.
Right.
And that's great. My desires for the scene are, like I said, I want anyone listening to this, I want you to go and find a partner or find someone that in a genre that you have no idea about and talk to them.
Right. Find your people.
Find people, find more people, make them your people.
Right.
And otherwise, like, I want everyone to do the same thing. It's creating harmony. Because I think as long as we just have pockets not talking to one another, we can't grow as much as, say, the Atlanta scene, where there's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of noise coming out of there. We're not going to grow as much as Richmond. We're not going to grow as much as Seattle. Some of the Houston, the big names, the big cities, where a lot is happening at once. You're not going to grow as thoroughly. Get your voice out. But for the most part, I will say that we are doing pretty well as a scene. And I feel like even though 2020 stopped a lot of people, I've seen more releases and more people going into the studio, recording newer hits to release in 2021, 2022, wind up an EP, wind up an album, than maybe I thought. I wasn't sure, and I don't think anyone else was sure what 2020, with COVID happening, with venue shut down, was really going to bring. Mm-hmm. I think when venues start to open up, you're going to see just this flood of creativity hit.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for a lot of folks to grow with the city, as you said. As the city grows, there's some wonderful opportunity for folks to attach themselves to the scene as it grows. So, for example, I'm not going to pat myself on the back per se, but I've been doing this podcast for 3 years. And I think over the 3 years, things have kind of expanded a little bit. I'm shocked sometimes when people go, wow, I've heard of your podcast. And I'm like, oh man, that just warms my heart. It makes me feel good that, here I am doing this niche little podcast thinking like 10 people are listening to it, or maybe just the bands or the people I have on listen to it. But it turns out other people do listen to it, which is nice, and there's opportunities for the musicians to build as the city has really started to grow, especially in the last decade. It's really built up. But that being said, they have to communicate more. And I will give a shout out to like Ryan Williams over at Time to Fly Music and Heist Brewery for promoting House of Funk, where certain times musicians this is an opportunity for them all to come, to a central location and kind of meet up and talk about what they're doing. So
I don't know if it's a secret project or not. He posted on his personal page on Facebook, but he's working on a hip hop showcase too, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's a lot of people in different dispersed genres of music in the city, and it would be nice for them to get together and be able to talk and get to know one another.
One of the craziest things that I've noticed just for, let's say, Swats and Omega Sparks, two of our nerdcore artists in the city, like every now and then they'll post on their personal pages like, hey, mention to me 10 artists in the city and I'll send them up. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you don't know some of these artists in your own genre and they don't know about you.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Well, honestly, I think a lot of people live in a bubble. They are so absorbed with what they're doing and their own lives. Not that that's a bad thing. I do too. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure you're guilty of it, but you don't get out enough. Me being a musician, right? So I've got my day job. And then before the pandemic, I was gigging most Fridays and Saturdays. So I didn't even get a chance to meet half the people I have on my podcast. If it wasn't for the Queen City Music Podcast, I wouldn't get to meet you. I wouldn't have gotten to meet, like, let's say, Reese or the guys from Province of Thieves or the guys who are coming out this month. I'll give them a shout out, the Pluto Gang. I wouldn't have met all these folks. But there's a lot that the city has to offer. But As a teacher of mine once said, get all the practice in you can now, because if you're fortunate, when you get out into the real world, you'll be too busy working as a musician to actually practice. And I think that starts to happen to musicians a lot. You're out in the real world playing and gigging and writing music and doing your thing. You don't have time to get out there and do everything, you know?
Wow. Yeah. Okay. You know what? I see that. I will. I'm definitely guilty of it. And I know that doing what I do has put me into more contact with people than like new people and old. Brandon Henry, he's part of Fear Until Fury. I actually worked with him a long time ago at AMC 24 over in Concord when we were growing up. And then I find out that he's part of like these music genres, working with people like, I'm going to butcher his last name, John Stagnassi. And he's part of like the jazz scene and classical. When I see Brand working with him, I see he was with Kelsey Ryan. He actually played her last set at Petra's before everything went down.
Okay.
But you never know who you're going to meet. And most of the people that you do are probably going to be awesome. In my experience, like I'm sure there's someone I didn't like, but
yeah. So as we start to wrap things up, Johnny G, what do you got coming up? Anything coming up for the blog? And how do we contact you if we want to find out more about 20XX?
You can I'll start with the end of that. You can contact me on Twitter, 20XXRun. You can find me over on channel 20XX on IG. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/RF20XX_CLT. You can find me on YouTube just as Reporting from 20XX. So you can, if you missed the music scene, you can look at some of my previously recorded concerts and be like, hey, I know that. Cool.
There we go.
This sounds horrible. You recorded this on a phone, obviously. And I'm like,
that's great.
What I have coming up, I'm just going to continue doing the weekly newsletters. There was a lot of goals that I had for 2020 that they're just going to stay goals. I did eventually want to get into, like, learn how to book bands, get poor people out there in my own way. But I think right now it's going to be just keeping up on doing profiles for people in the city. I eventually want to extend that to doing profiles of bands outside the city for maybe end of the month.
Right.
I'm just kind of working on that. I would like to get back into recording podcasts. I have 3 episodes on the Something Good For You network. Shout out to Alex Stiff and James Captain. Both of them are working musicians as the fill-ins and in their own right. I want to be able to also extend, have people have the knowledge of other services that musicians do. I'm working on the webpage right now to include that. Again, Alex Stiff, he just started doing Stiff Media. James, he does music lessons, and he's also a freelance musician.
Right.
Nicholas Robinson of the Business People once told me that Charlotte is more or less the Wild West when it comes to musicians. Anyone can be picked up from anywhere. Ian Pasquini, who was Jesus Crust, and he's also his own musician, but also works with, he worked with Kelsey Ryan. He also plays a little bit with King Cackle, Joe Nelson, trying to get their names out in other things they do other than music, because sometimes it's a little bit more than just, you do a little bit more. Kind of like you said, you have a day job, I have a day job, I come home and do all of this. And right. I think a lot of people are like that, but if I can get out other services that pertain to music, that help them out, then I think that's also a service that I could provide, even if it's not my main thing.
Well, that's fantastic. All right, Johnny, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. You have an amazing rest of the day.
You as well, man.
And that will bring episode 41 of the Queen City Music Podcast to a close. If you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our partner, Records on the Wall, at rexonthewall.com. And our newest partner, Reporting from 20XX, at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com. Until next month, be well and stay safe.